Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BFI Film Academy's June Lab. My name is Alex, and I'm the Film Academy Festival and Events producer. And today's masterclass will teach you how to generate, develop, and also present your short film ideas. And it will be led by Theresa and Gabs, who are our BFI Film Academy's resident script doctors. You may have met them if you attended any of the previous BFI Film Academy's labs at the South Bank, or maybe if you attended one of the previous editions of the Future Film Festival. Well, they're back. But before I hand over to Theresa and Gabs, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how the session today will run. So my colleague Winnie will be managing the chat box. So feel free to say hello, as you are already doing. If you have any questions about the BFI Film Academy, or our lab sessions, then please put them in the chat box and Winnie will answer them as soon as she can. And she'll be answering questions throughout today's sessions. If you do decide to use the chat box, then please be respectful to our panelists today, but also to each other. So please don't use offensive language in the chat box, and please don't share any personal information either. If you would like to network with each other, we've set up a Facebook networking group for you to do just that. So Winnie will shortly post that Facebook networking group link in the chat box. Feel free to join and collaborate with each other. If you have any questions for Theresa or Gabs today, so any questions about short films, how to present your ideas, then please put those questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of the screen. And we will devote the last 15 minutes of today's session to your questions, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can. So any questions, more generic questions about the BFI, go in the chat box, and any questions about today's sessions for Theresa and Gabs, they go in the Q&A box on the bottom. And as the final thing, I just wanted to let you know that today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the BFI YouTube channel next week. So I'll hand over to Theresa and Gabs. Enjoy the session. Welcome, Gabs. Welcome, Theresa.
Hello. Thank you, Alex.
Hello. Thank you, Alex. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, hello to those of you that we will have already met. We regularly are at the BFI Film Academy that takes place on the South Bank. So hopefully when we're back in person and doing real world events, we'll see you and you can just come over, join the queue that tends to form, and bring us any of your ideas, and we'll try and do our best to help you out. I'm going to be doing the first part of this session. So I'm going to elbow out. Which side is she on? Which side is she on? See you later, Theresa. See you in a bit, my love. So this is going to be pretty quick, but I'm going to give you an overview about coming up with ideas for short films, and what the sort of principles are that you need to bear in mind. So first things first is trying to get an idea. What I would say to begin with is that whatever short film you're making, when you're developing your work, whatever it is that each project is going to be, is going to ultimately lead you on to your next project. So yes, we can be very perfectionist about getting everything spot on, but also there's got to be room for experimentation and play. So don't kind of like come with that heavy thing of having to make your masterpiece right up at the front, because if you make your masterpiece now at the age of, I don't know, 16, then what are you going to do for the next 70 years? So ultimately we want to play, we want to experiment and learn, and every project that you work on for your whole careers will give you different pieces of insight into different elements of the industry. So enjoy that, go with it. So the easiest thing to think of, obviously, in terms of where you start with an idea is what's most interesting to you at this moment. Literally, it could just be something very innocuous from your day-to-day life, or it might be something that's really heavy duty and has a massive impact in terms of events on the world stage. Obviously, we're at these extraordinary times at the moment, and there's an enormous amount of stimuli all around us. When you kind of can identify what it is that's really of interest to you, trying to get an idea of why that might be, how it makes you feel, what the reactions are that it's giving you in terms of your emotions or your perceptions, and how you might, you know, change things to you know, get a different insight or feeling about that. So for example, if you were to think about something, there's lots of these things around at the moment, something that makes you angry, for example. Anger is a really useful stimuli to go from in terms of sparking ideas, because it provokes a very strong emotional reaction. And if something makes you angry, then you almost automatically know what you would do to fix that. And in that case, you've actually got the beginning and end of a story, because you've got going from one status to another, and there needs to be a change that occurs. So thinking about something that is already interesting to you, or something that makes you passionate in some way, is a really great starting point. Just brainstorming some of that stuff. Then if you were looking about kind of getting on with it, making it, you know, realizing that material in the most sort of efficient way, so that you can get it into festivals and you can start getting out there to screenings. It's also then honing your idea into something about, well, what have I got immediately available to me? There are numerous examples of short films made on very, very low budget, where they're in a single location, potentially a free location as well. And, you know, thinking also about any actors that you know, any equipment that you might be able to get hold of, and using those things to your advantage, remembering that sometimes, you know, even not having really, really strong like fancy equipment things can actually be to your benefit. There's a wonderful collaborator constantly with the BFI Film Academy, Mark Price, whose first film, which was called Colin, was made on really, really, really terrible cameras. He will talk to you himself, I'm sure, at some point about how terrible his camcorders were when he was making his debut feature. And actually, the fact that Mark brought his cinematic vision to that equipment, it worked within the genre that he was working towards, which was a zombie film. Talking about genres, it's thinking about the genres that you personally enjoy. You're in a conversation with an audience when you're communicating on short film, or in any film, any form of storytelling. And so, you know, bringing your own sense of being an audience member to your own work is really important, because you know as well as I do that when we're sitting there looking through Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever it might be, we're choosing based on what mood we're in and what our tastes are. Your audiences will do the same thing, and genre is going to help people to identify what their expectations are of what the material is. It will also help you enormously once you get onto the festival circuit to identify festivals that may be more likely to screen your work. So next slide, please. So thinking about then structuring your stories and how this works effectively, not just in short film, but you know, these are principles that cross over into all forms of storytelling. You all, I'm sure, are already familiar with the traditional 3-act structure, which is, you know, categorized beginning, middle and end. But the important thing is to think about what the components of those 3 acts actually are. In the beginning of the film, what we're doing is we're setting the scene, we're introducing the main characters, and we're getting a sense of what the world is. So within that, we're going to have an understanding of the things that are of priority to the characters, what's important to them, what they care about. In the partway through the film, there'll be what we call the middle section. That Act 2 section is going to be where the equilibrium that we've set up in the beginning is going to have been disrupted. Something's going to happen that's going to force your main character to take action. Now, this is important, that your main character is forced into taking action rather than just they feel like it. That's because drama comes from conflict. Conflict is a vital aspect of storytelling, and it feeds into these ideas of the audience being able to connect to the journey of your character, and a feeling of what we call catharsis, where they can identify with why that journey your character's going to go on in the film has realised something that's significant and that's important. We've all had, I'm sure, the experiences of sitting, chatting to somebody. They might be telling us something about what they've done with their day, and it's kind of meandering and like going nowhere, and nothing's really changed, and we're just sitting there going, oh my gosh, why are you wasting my time, forcing me to listen to this? Or they're just kind of going, yeah, I had a lovely day, and then it got better, and then it got better, and then it was just ended up absolutely marvelous. You're like, okay, and so there's a kind of a lack of engagement that we feel with that. However, if that same person maybe started on a terrible day and then something good happened to them, but then they lost that, and then they had to scrabble again to get something, you know, more positive happening again, and that felt like they had that for a little while, and then, oh my goodness, it looks like we're going to lose that again, everything's going to go wrong, and then, oh phew, finally we made the finish line, won a prize. That's an exciting story. It has tension, it has a build, like momentum, a build to it, and it feels more like we've earned that sense of relief and joy along with the main character when we get to the end of the story. So it's thinking about how any drama that happens is about forcing your character into a difficult situation. The other thing with the disruption, the conflicts that need to happen in that middle section, is that we know from just simply real life, when we meet people, it's only really when tough times happen that you tend to see the truth of really what a person is, who a person is. And so when the chips are down, when things are really hard, we get to know the character better because they reveal their true selves to us. So that's an important thing as well, to think about connecting to that character's journey. Then obviously in the ending, then it's known as a resolution, and that can be a misleading word because it's not necessarily that everything's tied up in a bow and perfect. It might be open-ended. The main thing to keep in mind about the ending of a film is that even if it is open-ended and we don't have clear answers, the audience have a sense of why what you've just told them is important or has some form of significance. So what is it that you're trying to communicate? What is the purpose of your story? And I would strongly recommend that when you're coming up with your ideas in the first instance, that you have a sense of why it is that you want to tell this story. It doesn't have to be that you're looking to change the world or, you know, save a community or anything kind of, you know, completely, you know, saintly like that. It may be that it's a very small personal story, or it might be a comedy, it might be very light-hearted, but it should still have a clear sense of what it's actually about. What are you actually saying with it? What do you think? And your ending will essentially be your closing statement in that sense. Next slide, please. Okay, so thinking about this notion of change and the momentum that we need through a film, the person that we connect to obviously is the main protagonist of the film, and they will go through a change. That change will enable us to understand, will enable the audience to understand what's important, what your final point is. The examples I've used here, obviously the great classic from Hitchcock, Psycho, and you can see that in the first picture on the left of the screen, we have Norman Bates looking perfectly charming and friendly, and next to that, he does not. He looks completely terrifying, and I still get very scared by that image. I don't know why I use that today because it always upsets me. But you can see that even the framing, the color palette is, you know, even though it's black and white, he's almost kind of blending into the background in that first shot, and then there's the contrast is really, really high in the second shot. We can see the characters change just even through the visuals there. And it's important to think about how you're going to take the audience from one stage to another. It automatically raises the question of how does this, you know, charming, sweet-seeming young man become the image at the end. We've already got some intrigue there, and it's your job as a writer then to take us through that journey and to help us to understand how that transformation can take place. The images at the bottom of the screen are of Carey Mulligan in Suffragette, directed by Sarah Gavron. And at the beginning of the film, we see her dressed in dark colours as she is there. She's actually, the package that she's carrying has been given to her as an errand that she's running for her boss, who is vile. And she is very much living in a repressed state. This is a time before women had the vote. And then we see her at the end of the film. She's wearing the armband in honour of Emily Davison, who was part of the suffragette movement, and she has the sash there as well, the suffragette medals, having been imprisoned for her activism. And you know, the other wonderful thing, again from a visual storytelling point of view, is you can see the colour palettes, how different they are, and the fact that she's actually facing in the different direction as well. These things are very deliberate choices, and whilst they might not appear in your script, what will appear in your script is such a strong character shift that it will enable the director to think about how to navigate these notions of juxtaposition and opposition, so that the audience can continuously be absorbing that sense of change. So the change happens on the page to the character. The director and the DOP will actually then visualize that as they go through. Next slide, please. Okay, the crucial thing about watching any film or hearing any story is that it is an emotional journey for the audience member, and it's very important that we care about what's going on with the characters. This still is from Hair Love, which is the Oscar-winning short film from a couple of years ago by Matthew A. Cherry. And in essence, it's the little girl is very concerned about getting her hair done, which may seem like it's not such a big deal, but as we watch the film, and it is available freely on YouTube to have a look at, then we see what the real importance of this is. Even before we know the significance of her dad sort of doing her hair properly, we understand very early on that this means a great deal to the little girl, and we care about her. She's a character that we can understand through her behaviours and her actions, that this feels very important and significant. And because we see the film through the little girl's eyes, we really connect to the need for her dad to accomplish this task for her, and therefore her delight at the point that we've got there on the screen grab is something that we share in. We're overjoyed for her. And in that way, because we've connected with that main character, we can share in her emotional journey. The way that a main character works in film is that they essentially become like an avatar or a cipher for the audience. So it's like the audience step inside them and feel what they feel. So if the main character is happy, we're happy. If they're scared, we're scared. Now, the important thing with this is that obviously when we can be coming up with a story, we might have quite an interesting concept that might be quite complicated. It may be that it's taking place on kind of philosophical levels, or something that's quite complicated for the audience to immediately understand. If you have a straightforward emotional arc that the character is going to go on, however, i.e. being frustrated to being to being relieved and overjoyed, then we can follow that emotional journey, even if we can't get a sense of all of the nuances of the concept in terms of its complexity. And it's important to always prioritize the emotional journey so that we understand why a character is behaving the way that they are, and we can connect to if they're doing something out of anger, if they're doing something out of joy, if they're doing something from a place of frustration, etc. So that we, even if we don't know all of the elements, all of the minutiae of their situation, we can understand that it's coming from an emotional state and follow that. That has the logic for us. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on from that, it is the fact that we all will feel things in a different way, and that will look different according to who the character is. So, you know, some people, the examples I've got here, there's 3 films that demonstrate moments of anger from each of the characters, and we can think about, oh, how do people behave when they're angry? The typical perhaps reaction that we might expect is that somebody is going to shout and get offensive, and they're going to swear, and perhaps they're going to get violent. And that is perhaps the case in some situations, but it isn't for everybody. Some people become very quiet. They become very internalized with their anger, but we still need to think about what that might look like on screen and what our characters do that shows us that. So going from left to right here, the example on the far left is Kathy Bates in Misery, which is an adaptation of a Stephen King book, and her character, as you can see in the image, is quite an angry, violent person, and she becomes extremely violent in the film, enacting methods of torture on the main character. She is, as we find out, she's mentally unstable and extremely dangerous. In the middle, we have Taraji P. Henson playing Rebecca Johnson in Hidden Figures, and there is justified anger that she feels partway through the film, and when she becomes angry, she's incredibly articulate. She's justified, as I said, and she is composed and dignified with it. Again, a reflection of who the character is. She does have those attributes, and therefore the way in which she becomes angry, the way in which she demonstrates anger, is in line with who she is as a character in the film as a whole. The final image is one of my favourite films. It's from Kelly Reichardt, whose film First Cow is currently out, and I hope that you get the opportunity to see that. This is from a film called Wendy and Lucy, where Wendy is played by Michelle Williams, and she's recently been, in this image, she's just been arrested for a very, very minor crime, and she's experiencing utter frustration. Her character is a very subdued character who doesn't speak very much, and so the way in which she articulates or demonstrates anger on screen is very quiet, and yet even through her gestures and her facial expressions, the audience can clearly understand the bubbling rage that is beneath. Now, in all of these cases, all of these female characters are experiencing quite extreme levels of rage, but the way in which they do it is also, as I say, revealing of the truth of their nature and of their character, of their core characteristics. And it's important to think about that and apply that to your own characters. So, okay, you may behave in one way when you're elated and happy. Is that true to how your character behaves? How would they behave in a circumstance where they're feeling a certain emotion? It might not be the same as the sort of standard or stereotypical approach. It's going to demonstrate something of their uniqueness. Next slide, please. Okay, the other thing that's useful when we're thinking about developing our stories is the perspective through which we tell them. So sometimes taking a little bit of a step back and thinking, you know, if we look at this from a different viewpoint, can be helpful to us. It can put us into somebody else's shoes. And what I would say is that sometimes when we do that, we can actually create an even stronger impact. So whilst we're very used to seeing things, let's say, from like the hero's point of view, if you were to take something and see it from the bad guy's point of view, as we're seeing quite a lot with things like Cruella, obviously just out, then we can shine a different light on a situation, and we can have a different angle of awareness and empathy. Now, that may serve us quite well, for example, if we are dealing with something perhaps that's quite a controversial situation, perhaps something that's quite a difficult topic, because if we can take it actually from the point of view of somebody who perhaps is let's say an anti-hero, then actually by seeing the world and the logic that they have, it can uncover how harmful that issue may be, in a way that gives the audience greater access to the intricacies of that world that somebody who is an entirely good character may not actually have the awareness of. So seeing things from a slightly different perspective may actually help you unravel some of the complexities of the issues that you're working with. Also bearing in mind that the way in which we see things on screen is going to be reflective of the character's viewpoint. So just looking at something like the image of the side profile of the blonde woman, that is Kim Novak in Vertigo, also by Hitchcock, and we are looking at her from the gaze of the main character. We are literally sharing his point of view. So bearing in mind when you're writing your scripts, that we're thinking, well, whose point of view am I seeing this through? Equally, the image with the gun, which is a stock image, we've got the point of view of the person holding the gun. We haven't got the point of view of the person running from it, or about to be shot by that gun. So the angle that you choose to take, and essentially then the way in which you write what we're looking at on the screen, is going to be affecting our understanding of what the point of view is, whose point of view we're seeing the world through. The next slide, please. Okay, so how we do this is through visual storytelling. It's crucial to remember that, yes, of course, we're writing a screenplay, we're putting words onto a page, but we're putting those words onto the page in order to inform a visual medium. And film is a visual medium more above everything else. So, of course, the words are important, the dialogue, what have you, as well as the sound, but it's the images that are going to leave the strongest impact. And through gestures and through seeing somebody's behavior, mannerisms that are going to indicate mood and emotion, we're going to be able to interpret the substance of what a character's emotional journey is. So it might be a very simple gesture. We have the hand holding there from a stock image, but it might be a very symbolic gesture, as the one with Jennifer Lawrence playing Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games is giving that completely symbolic gesture there. We see the aggression from Gaspar Noé's film of La Haine with the gun gesture there, and the sort of freedom through dance that the character feels in Fish Tank by Andrea Arnold. These are very evocative mannerisms that demonstrate mood, demonstrates the psyche of the character entirely through the imagery of their behavior, what they're actually doing. So when you're thinking about mood and emotion, then it's thinking, well, what does that look like? How do I demonstrate that on screen? There's always a balancing act where we don't want to kind of over direct on the page, but if you can, kind of give it an indication of, let's say, somebody's behavior where that perhaps they're slouched, and we understand through slouched that they are open, or we understand perhaps through they've got rounded shoulders, that they're feeling a bit more vulnerable. You only need to say their shoulders are rounded, and it's like, oh, okay, they feel vulnerable. We will intuit that psychological state through the fact that you've given them a visual kind of behavior to demonstrate. Next slide, please. Visual storytelling, of course, runs across all of the, there's a priority throughout the entire film. And if I can kind of imbue you with anything of a kind of mantra for this session to take with you as you write your scripts, it would be to have a sense of what am I looking at. Whenever I'm reading scripts from my students, it's something that I keep returning to. They may have pages and pages of dialogue, but I will always ask them, well, what am I looking at? What am I seeing here? Because we have to keep in mind, as I said, the visual nature of film and cinema. And of course television, that is going to actually have an enormous amount of information in there. This image is from a short film called 1745, directed by Gordon Napier, and the two women in it are incredible performers, Moyo and Mireille Akande, Mireille actually wrote the screenplay, and they co-produced it together, and hopefully they will get this into a feature at some point. But I'd like you to just have a look at this image and see the amount of information that's embedded in it. Obviously, first off, we can see that this is a period film. We can see that from their costumes, that this is a period film. Also, their costumes are a type of tartan that then tells us we're in Scotland. We can also see that from the landscape. We can see that the weather is not great. It's misty, it's kind of slightly muted shades there. We can see, you know, the key juxtaposition here, which I know when I first saw this film made me realise that I had not seen this story before, is there are two black women in Scotland in 1745, which I had not seen a story that told that point of view before. The story is about slavery and about the black people that were slaved in Scotland, which I think is a highly under recognised part of British history. If you look a little bit closer, you will notice that the character in the foreground has a metal, well, it's a sort of chain, really. It's a horrible device around her throat. At first glance, it may look like a piece of jewelry. It's not, but you know, obviously, if you kind of go closer and closer into these images, you can see that. Now, every element of this image actually serves story purpose. It helps us to understand something about the world, the characters, the relationships. We can see that the character that's one step back there, she is looking in more distress. The one in the foreground looks extremely determined. That is the dynamic of their relationship. And in, you know, very strong short films, what you'll find is, you know, every every scene is almost a microcosm of the whole. You can take a snapshot and kind of see, oh my gosh, all of the themes, the principles are being reinforced in various ways and to different degrees, but in various ways throughout every moment of the film. Just to give you complete and utter spoilers here, because that's part of your work as screenwriters, is to not be afraid of spoilers and to understand how we analyze things and see the progression. This is from quite early in the film, and what's happening is these two women are escaping from the slave owner. As the film progresses, what happens is their dresses actually they become ripped, but they also change the way that they wear them, so that they start to wear them the way that their ancestors in Africa wore them, the place from where they've been kidnapped. And we see that through a flashback, actually, that's how the older sibling remembers her mother wearing the dress in that fashion. So they actually physically alter their costumes to show their progression into freedom. And naturally then with that we see their expressions change, and we also see that reflected in the way in which the actual landscape appears. Obviously it feels sunnier, it feels a bit brighter, and the colouring feels more optimistic. It's important to think as well that these, you know, or to keep in mind rather, that these things are there deliberately. They're not there for simply a style point of view. They are there in order to tell the story. Everything that appears on screen is there deliberately. It's ended up, even if whilst you're shooting it happened by accident, if it's remained in the final edit, it's there on purpose. There's a construction that's going on with everything. And so your job as a writer and a storyteller and filmmaker is to have the awareness of what the effect of all of those elements are. They work like little jigsaw pieces and clues to underline, to emphasize, and to increase your engagement with the story that's unfolding before us. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the questions that people get very worried about is script format. So I've just put this here to hopefully help you a little bit, to just look at a kind of example of how we do this and how it works. There are an enormous amount of increasing number of screenwriting packages that are available, some that you have to pay for, some that are free. What I would recommend is that you simply search out Google free screenwriting software, and I'm certain that the latest ones will come up. There are the one that's the industry standard, which is I think quite expensive really, but nevertheless it's fabulous and wonderful, and we need it, is Final Draft. There's also a package called Celtex, which CELTX, and that's available, or I think that may have changed a little bit now, but there are new ones coming out all the time, and that will do all of the formatting for you, but you will still have to understand that you need to have things in the right place. So you can see at the top of the page here, interior, washing room, laundry, Bethnal Green, London, 1912 day. This is from very early in the film. It's one of the opening scenes. So that scene heading is there to give us a sense not just of where we are, but the script ultimately is a tool on the set that's going to tell all the other members of the crew what their job is. And so in pre-production, as many of you will know, what's happening is lists are being made all the time of locations, of what your shooting schedule is going to be, obviously of characters, props, sound cues, things like this. So things have to have this very clear formatting in order for everybody to be able to flip through and go, okay, what's my job? What's my role on this film? Not everybody's reading it with the level of detail that the director will, because that's not necessary for every single member of the crew. So keep in mind that these have to kind of follow that format for a very specific reason, and to help you support your collaborators and the rest of your crew. So we've got scene heading there right up at the top, all in capitals. The scene description, you can see the loud bellow, that's in capitals because it's a sound cue of a factory bell, again sound cue. Women begin to file out. This is a visual description of what's happening, what the action is, and it's just in normal text there. Maud Watts, the main character, her name is capitalised so that casting can go through and go, oh, yep, okay, Maud Watts, we need to have someone to play that. Laundry workers, again, we need them cast. But then scrubs a deep washing vat as the last laundry workers drained from the floor. So again, visual description. It's sort of telling us about what people are feeling inside. It's telling us about their behaviours. Mr. Taylor, with irritation, throws a parcel at her. So we get a sense of, again, the action that's happening there. We always must have the ages of your characters in your scripts as well. Again, from a casting point of view, but also because it can substantially affect the meaning or the context of the actual story. So just as an example, if you were to have, let's say, two male characters that are having a fight, let's say that they are both 16, that's one meaning. Let's say that one of them is 35 and the other one is 6. Horrible. That's a whole other story. Let's say that one of them is 12 and the other one is 83. Again, whole other story, whole other meaning, and that's just on the basis of their ages. And of course those are quite extreme examples, but nevertheless you can see that the entire dynamic of the story changes according to their ages. So it's really important that you always include that. Also, page numbers, vital. If anybody drops a script on a set and that hasn't been bound and you don't have page numbers on it, it's virtually impossible to put it back in the right order. And with your dialogue, it's, as you can see here, they're very short lines of dialogue. They're quite precise, and they just get straight to the point. You don't want to really have long extended monologues in screenplay, for the fact that the audience are going to respond, as I say, much more to the images than they are to the words of the characters. So always keeping an emphasis on what's on the screen rather than trying to put too much explanation in the dialogue. What I would always kind of ask you to bear in mind is that the information about the world needs to be on the screen through the images and not in the dialogue. If you find that your dialogue is containing story information or explanation of the story, then it's time to think about where else that can go and how else that can be depicted, because dialogue is actually much more for relating emotion and character rather than information. Information needs to be on the screen. Okay, and then next slide, please. My final slide before I hand over to my beautiful colleague, Theresa. So when you're thinking about short films, then the ones with a straightforward concept are going to be more effective, because you've got a short form and we can just jump into that world and we can connect to what it is that's happening and go entirely with the emotional journey, rather than trying to kind of like work out all the time. If we're trying to work out what the concept is all the time, we're distracted from the emotional journey. It's really important to understand the limitations of the form, but also the possibilities of it. The best way to do this is to watch as many short films as you can. I know, of course, there's an incredible resource through the BFI that you know will be able to be pinpointed and recommended to a number of different short films through this network, but it's also possible to just simply Google, BAFTA winning short films, or Oscar winning short films, Cannes winning short films. Just like look at the ones that are kind of famous festival winners, but then you can research down through that, so you can kind of go, oh, okay, that filmmaker made a great film. What else have they made? What else did they do? And you can kind of track back. So it's really important to watch as many short films as you can, and please do share them amongst yourselves as well, because you'll kind of create a little mini archive then. And even if you don't like a short film, if you feel like it hasn't struck you in a particular way, there's still a lot to learn from it. We can analyze that and go, well, why did that not strike me? Why did I not really get the substance of that? I don't understand why my colleague or teammate or whoever really loves that film, and you can have a conversation about it, deconstruct it, begin to analyze it. Essentially, when you're getting into filmmaking, you're kind of looking under the car bonnet of all these devices of storytelling and figuring out how everything works. Having a short film with a very clear intention, you know why you're telling it. It's really, really important. That's going to give you a kind of anchor throughout your creative process, and it will enable you to decide what to include and what to exclude. And that decision is going to be necessary throughout the process. And yeah, knowing that you're creating an emotional connection with your audience, and the way that you're doing that is through story and character. That's always going to be your top priority. And again, I must recommend this short film, which is a recent BAFTA winner from a few years ago now, actually, called Operator, which I know is also freely available online. And so I shall now pass over to my beautiful colleague, Theresa Boden. And thank you all for your time and attention, and I shall be back for the Q&A at the end.
Hello there. Thank you very much, Gabriella. That was brilliant. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be talking about how to present your ideas. So this is kind of primarily mood boards and pitch decks, also storyboards, and also kind of not just using them as a selling tool or a presenting tool, but also to follow on from what Gabriella's been talking about in developing an idea. They're really useful tool for mood boards, are a really useful tool for writers and writers directors to develop the idea, expand it, and actually kind of develop your visual language, because as we previously said, it's a visual medium. So you should be thinking all the time about, how does this look? What am I looking at? So the difference between them are, mood boards are primarily a script story developmental tool for writers and writers directors, and they're also used as a promotional tool for when you're applying for funding, or you might be wanting to attract collaborators for your idea. And pitch deck is mainly a selling document, so it's also used for funding applications. Many competitions now and funding applications require you to send in a mood board, or or a small pitch deck alongside your script, and also they can be used for kind of attracting, again, cast and key members of your crew. They're a really important statement of your idea visually. They can communicate tone, style, genre, character, emotional, the themes of the story, and they're really useful because when you're in pre-production, they can communicate the idea really clearly to your creative team, so that everybody knows the kind of visuals and the visual look they're after, so everybody knows what to do. It gives everybody a clear picture. When you're trying to get funding and applying for kind of competitions and things, this originally, the pitch decks were originally in mood boards, were really a common tool in advertising. So they would be used in advertising because they would be able to communicate the idea for a commercial visually to the clients who aren't used to reading scripts, don't want to read a script, they want to see what it looks like. And this is why it's important. It's really, I can hear the writers going, well, why do I need to do this? Well, it's a really useful tool for you to actually kind of develop your visual language. So you're in collating images and making a mood board and thinking about what your tone is, what your genre is, and the characters and everything. It just helps you to kind of really, really define that idea visually. Okay, let's look at a couple of posters. That's a good place to start when you're thinking about it. So the posters that we have here, there's the Florida Project, which is a wonderful film. And you can see from the colors, there's a rainbow in the background. There's a kind of a little girl running around. It's obviously tropical. It's the Florida Project is the title. So it gives you the idea of the genre of the film, and also the main protagonist, who is the little girl. And that it's got some kind of a little bit of magic realism in there. There's something that's a little bit different. It's the color is intense. It's kind of rich. And then you look at Little Monsters, and you can see there's zombie hands at the bottom, but the character is joyful and leaping with her musical instrument, and it's obviously bright colors, and it tells us that yes, it's going to be a horror film, but it's also a comedy. There's a comic aspect to this. It's not going to be a really horrific, scary movie. And then we go to Relic. So we have 3 generations of women, which is, it's a wonderful film. And it's a ghost story. So you can see from the elements in the background, the location, there's something kind of supernatural about it. There's something faded. The nature is kind of taking over the background. So that's a starting point to kind of thinking about images and on what they can tell us. And that's how you start with your mood board. But I think next, let's look at an example. So next slide, please, Fiona. So this is Rory Wilson's mood board and research for Loco, and he's a BFI Future Film Festival alumni. He'd already shown a film called Drop previously, but in 2021 he won Best Film Award for this film Loco, and he wrote and directed it. So basically this was his mood board. So he collated his research. So this is an interesting, another thing that you can include in your mood board. If you're researching an issue, if there is, you know, you're dealing with something that is based on a true event, or it might be, you know, the issue might be kind of current or historical, then you might have research that you want to collate. This explains to whoever's looking at the mood board, right, so this is what it's about. The images on the mood board, so we've got a collection of images at the top, which kind of show a sequence, and in terms of the story, really. So we have this train driver who looks happy in his job, you know, that's his action, that's what he does. And then the next scene is we're going through the track, so and we're under the tunnel on the train. So we have a sense that we're going to be seeing this from the driver's point of view. And then the next scene is a dark corridor. The tones are really muted and dark suddenly, and that goes to his state of mind. So this story is about a train driver who was left traumatized after an incident on the tracks. And kind of the research he did was, it reveals the kind of the untold stories of PTSD that train drivers suffer when they have, you know, incidents on the track, and goes to highlight an incident, an issue at the end of the film. Sorry, spoiler alert again, but that now that drivers are being denied compensation for PTSD. So he wanted to explain and explore this kind of how they feel, the emotional, you know, effect on them of going through this trauma. So, and he's also included a storyboard, a couple of storyboard tags. So we've got a sequence of shots that show kind of the impact of the incident, and a close-up of the character's face. So we can see the emotional effect on him, and it shows the tension and the pace. We've got the traveling through the train track, the tunnels. So it's a traveling shot. So it's showing tension and pace. And on the bottom row, we have sort of the aftermath of the incident. So the emotional effects on the character. So he's chosen a color palette that is, you know, it's moody, it's dark, it's serious. This is obviously serious. So it goes to genre as well. You know, this is a drama. This isn't a light-hearted treatment of the subject. And the last picture in the tile shows how emotionally, you know, he is changed by what's happened to him. So that's a really good example. I mean, and that's just a mood board. So he didn't do a pitch deck, but he did a mood board, and this was for him to explore what this film is about before he went into production to make it. Let's go on to creation. So for you to start looking at making your own mood boards. Next tile, please. Okay, so, there's no set way of creating mood boards. It's basically a collage of images that illustrate the story world and the genre and the tone, the character and the aesthetic that you're after. And as I've said before, as a developmental tool, it's really great way of visually exploring an idea. So actually kind of, you know, you can think outside the box. You know, as Gabriella succinctly said before, you know, you need to kind of expand it, explode it a little bit, so to find out where the boundaries are. So start with brainstorming keywords. So you know, think of keywords that represent your themes or your tone or the style, or if you've got an idea for a character. And you can ask yourself questions, you know, so maybe you've got a character or a theme or a location already in mind. What's the location? You know, is it a dark, moody kind of, is it a horror movie? Is it a psychological horror movie? So you can see the picture that I've chosen on the top there is of this dark, foreboding sort of corridor that looks really decrepit and derelict, and goodness knows what's at the end of that corridor. So that gives us like the genre of, you know, it's going to be a horror film or it's going to be a thriller. What are your characters like? What are they doing? So we've got the three girls who are obviously friends. It looks like you know, the genre looks like a comedy. The colour's bright. Think about the colour palette to reflect the genre, and they're all smiling, so that suggests it might be a rom-com or a comedy. The picture in the middle, for your main protagonist, you can explore the emotions that the emotional journey that your main character is going to be going through. So she's obviously upset, she's in anguish. So there's the rain on the window pane, so it gives an idea of the mood. Then we've got the boy on the skateboard. That could be a thriller. It could be, you know, it could be a teen movie where he's speeding away he's escaping. It could be a road movie. And then obviously think about the location, or as well as the genre. So you might be setting it in a derelict building. It might be an urban setting. So I've chosen that picture at the top there to kind of evoke that idea of the location. Or it might be fantasy, you know, like the one on the bottom, the woman with the castle in the clouds. It clearly states this is what the genre is. This is what this is going to be about. The open road with the wide, big sky. This could be a road movie. So start by collecting images and screen grabs, and you can use them from films that you like and that inspire you to get ideas. You know, look at films that you like and what are the elements in those films that you like. You know, what's the tone, the genre, the characters, the story world, the theme, and do screen grabs. So I'm going to give you resources at the end for you to be able to do this, and look at pictures that actually represent emotions or the things that you're going to be going through. So what kind of lighting, what kind of colour palette will you use? What inspires you? And think about what the idea is. What are you saying? Okay, so and what's your connection to it as well? So you might be able to, if you're making a film, you know the location, you can go and take stills yourself, go and take photographs of locations that kind of inspire you and that link with your idea. Use your friends as characters to take emotional photographs, you know, or action to represent, you know, the character's journey. You can all do that yourself. You don't need to take them all off online. And then collect all of your elements. And don't forget things like architecture and objects and clothing, and also think about if you're including text in your mood board, think about typography. So that's also a good tool to showcase some keywords or a relevant quote. And if you're having trouble crafting it, look at some examples online. I'll give you resources for that at the end. and watch a movie that's related to your idea. Look at how the production design and the art direction looks and feels, and what emotions are you feeling, you know. Okay, so let's have a look at Kieran Stringfellow's pitch deck. So let's move on to a pitch deck now. Okay, so this is a pitch deck made by the creative team of writer-director Kieran Stringfellow and his producer Tasha Williams. So Kieran is also a BFI Future Film Festival alumni, and his short Bulldog was part of the 2021 BFI Future Film Festival, and he was nominated for Best Film and Best Director. And I have to tell you, thank you very much for him allowing us to show you this. His short Tummy Ache for New Creatives North is going to be on BBC iPlayer soon, so you'll be able to watch that. But he's currently in development with BFI Network on this short film, Tow Truck. So, and this is the pitch deck that he made that actually helped him get the funding for the film. So this is why this is important to think about doing. So, okay, so let's look at the title page. So this is the format. So you'd start with a title page, got the mother and son, very intense and close. And he actually says, you know, the genre is comedy drama. And we can see that there's a very close relationship. The colours aren't really dark and moody. There's a lot of sort of blurring at the background. So we can see that, you know, this is going to be about the relationship between them. Next slide, please. So, and then he starts with an introduction to the project. So this is where you might put your log line on the title page also, some people do that. But this is, he's introducing, and it's a project overview of the whole thing. So that introduces one of the main characters, which is Nikki, the mum of the boy Key. And he says that, you know, a young single mum kidnaps a dog in a bid to win some prize money at a local dog show. And it's a short film drawn from his experience growing up with a single mum with bipolar disorder. So he's introducing, this is what it's about. And we've got an image there of, it's a film still from a film called Mommy from 2014. And you can see that she's a sympathetic character, but she's anxious. You can look at the gesture of her hands. But we have a sympathetic connection to her, and also, so that's his point of view of that character. And also he's saying what his personal connection is to the material, which is very important. Next slide, please. Okay, and here's his synopsis, or one pager, as it is always known. This is a good format to have a picture on one side, text on the other. And he's just giving a short synopsis of the whole film. So it's telling us everything that happens, and you know, the emotional journey for both characters, and how it leaves us with an active question. And the still there is from Morven Caller, which is a wonderful Lynn Ramsey film, which you should all see. And basically, again, it's kind of, it's exploring an element of Nikki, the main protagonist character, of her emotional journey. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is a standalone quote from the director's statement, which follows, and it's from his personal view and experience and how it relates to Nikki's relationship with her son. And it's also kind of, it's a signal for us, this is why we should care about this character. So that's the important thing, that she is sympathetic. This is going to be tough, but this is why you should be interested. Slide 5, next one, please. So this is his director's statement, which is another kind of element you can include. And you can also, sometimes you'll have a writer's statement and a director's statement if they are not the same. And again, note the format, text on one side, big picture on the other side. And there's a picture of him with his mum. So this is really drawing on the kind of the unique connection that he has to this material, and why it's important for him to tell this story. Because that's what you need to get across. Why is it important to tell the story? Why now? And what is it about that story that is unique? And for him, he wanted to capture, you know, the roller coaster, emotional roller coaster of growing up with a bipolar mum, but that it wasn't all negative for him. It's a very rich experience, and one that he's very grateful for. So we get the passion for the material. Okay, next slide. That's his mood board. So you can see from all the images he's chosen, cinematic references and images that have influenced him and the piece. So he's picked out Lucretia Martel, Claire Denise and Terence Davies, because they evoke the same kind of compassionate, loving portrayals of families and challenging, complex families. And you can see by the tone of the colour, they're all quite similar in the way that they're looking at. And we've also got the dog. So the dog is quite an important character. So we've actually got a kind of a sympathetic portrait of the dog as well. And everything kind of embeds in the kind of the colours and the intensity of the relationship. Okay, next slide. Storyboards. So he's done storyboards as well. So this is not, you don't have to, it's just if you've got them and they do show, this is what it's going to look like. These are the camera angles I'm going to use. This is kind of the pace. This is a sequence of shots. It's a really good idea. Okay, next slide. And now we've got a crew page. So here's where you would put the crew and the cast that you have already attached to the project. So at the moment, they've got the writer, director, producer, DOP, sound designer, and composer. So that's kind of, you know, you may not have that yet, but if whoever you're applying with, whether it's you just as a writer, director, or you as a producer, or a creative team, put small biographies, little pictures, just so that the funders know what kind of experience you've had, what you've done before, and what you would bring to this particular piece. Next slide, please. Okay, so he's gone into the risks and the challenges. So basically this is just anticipating questions that might be asked by the funders. So they have, you know, they're anticipating the challenges of COVID. They're working with a dog and they're working with a child actor. So they're going through, we've done this before, we've had experience, or, you know, they're thinking about how they might address them. This reassures the funders that you've actually considered any complications that could arise and how you might address them. The image there from Persona, which is an Ingmar Bergman film, 1966, which is, again, it's about emotional relationships, family relationships. Slide 10, please, on that one. Strategy. So basically, this is the kind of, you know, how do they think about, why did they apply for funding? Why was it important for them to apply for funding? Originally, it was thought of being a low budget film, that they would kind of, you know, they'd experiment and develop style. But then they realized that they wanted to actually really kind of have a proper budget and guidance of a funding body to kind of actually make the most of this very personal film. So so that's why they've applied for the funding, and they have a strategy for marketing. So they've already said we have a strategy for marketing with festival formula. So it you know, it will be marketed properly. So it's all kind of, it's ticking all the boxes for the funding application. application. Okay, the last slide. Really important, contacts. Always have a contact page at the end. And here you can see that he would put his email address and his phone number. But here for you is please connect with Kieran Stringfellow and Block B Films, his company, at Block B Films on Twitter and Instagram. They post lots of information about what they're up to, and then they do the love to connect with other filmmakers. So it's a really good place to connect them and network with him. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, mood boards and pitch decks to sell your ideas. So as before, you know, you will need them now to apply for funding opportunities. BFI Network do require a mood board or a pitch deck, and also to attract your key cast and crew. So there are some basic elements that we've just seen before: title, image page, log line, a brief premise, a one-page synopsis and a mood board, your writer or writer and director statement, and key characters, locations, story worlds. These can all be either on one page or they can be on separate pages. Depends on how you want to do it. And there are many more. So, you know, if you were constructing a full pitch deck, then there would be things like a technical sheet. There would be, you know, think about comparable films that reflect your mood, as Kieran did. Budget, you might include a budget, or you might include your distribution goals, as Kieran did with Festival Formula. And you might have any kind of, if you've got any SFX or it's possibly animated, you might include the design of the animation. So there's lots and lots of things you can put in there, but keep it, for a short film, it doesn't need to be exhaustive. Okay, so, and then that's the last, those are stills from Loco, those images there. And so you can see the journey of the film through Andrew Schofield's wonderful performance in it. And you're getting the emotional response, you know, it's the emotional response to what he's going through. Okay, that's it, really. So when you're developing it, if you're looking for images, go on to Film Grab. They get free screen grabs from there. Pixabay and Unsplash are free searchable image download and use. Always, whenever you're looking for free images, you can Google, you know, download free images. Always check the terms and conditions for usage, so because you don't want to get into copyright problems. But usually you're fine for personal or, you know, internal business use, which is what this is basically. You're not publishing them, but in case you're publishing them on your website, because you might have a web page that, you know, you can get a little website dedicated to your film, and that's where you would put your mood board and your pitch deck, then just make sure that the copyright's clear. Also, I think it was mentioned about the BFI Network short film recommendations, the Netflix and Chill Twitter handle. Also, you can look on shortoftheweek.com and you can search genre, subject, theme, country, virtually anything. And there are lots of award-winning films on there, short films on there, and they're all shorts from all over the world. So that's a great idea to look at those. If you want to look at online examples, more examples of pitch decks, Moon Unit have samples there, and also the other address for shift.com. They are a company that actually make professional pitch decks. There are quite a few companies that make professional pitch decks for production companies and people, but they will email you free examples of 3 pitch decks they've made for short films of very contrasting genres, and there are links below there too films, the finished films, so you can look at the pitch deck and look at the film. So that will help inspire you as to what kind of things you can include and how it works. Okay, well, I'm done now. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Theresa. And thank you, Gabs, if you want to come on screen now too. We are out of time, but we are going to try and get through some audience questions for those of you who can stay with us a little longer. So I'll just rush through them. I think the first few are for you, Gabs. They're like the questions that we received early on. So I have two questions from two different people about the 3-act structure. So I'll ask them together. The first one is, can the 3-act structure also work for television pilot scripts? And the second one is, can the 3-act structure be utilized for animated shorts like animated web series?
Yes. 3-act structure is the basic principle of storytelling. It's how our brains work. If you haven't seen somebody for a little while and you're telling them what you've been up to, you are using 3-act structure because you're going, oh, well, I was doing this, blah, blah, blah. This is who was involved in it. And then this happened and it was terrible. And the apocalypse happened. We've been in lockdown, blah, blah, blah. But now it's fine because we can go to the pub again. Hooray. So you've got a 3-act structure there already. We can't help it. It's the way that human beings have told story from the beginnings of time. Every story has 3-act structure. You need to know it.
Great. Next question. Should we develop the character's background and personality before writing our script? Or should the process of writing the script reveal to us who the character is?
There's no right or wrong way. You do it, you find out your way. It depends on the story, depends on the project, depends on what mood you're in, what you want to do with it. It can happen anyway. There's no one's going to come along and like mark you on what your process is. So know that. All anyone's worried about is what the final thing is. So whatever you find easiest. Some projects I've started with character, some projects I've started with concept. What I would say is the more development that you do before you start writing the script, the easier writing the script is going to be. So if you can get your outline and your treatment and get a sense of who your character is before you start committing, well, I say committing, you're never committing words to page on script because it's going to evolve and change as you go along the whole production process. But if you can get as much of your resources in mind beforehand and have them, written down, treatment on paper, really nicely detailed, is going to help you to write the script. I would always say, always think about what the character's feeling. You feel something before you do something. You feel something before you say something. So getting a sense of what your character feels at any given moment is really important.
Great. Next one, when choosing a section of a feature script to make as a proof of concept short, what stage of the feature-length story is best to focus on? And how can proof of concept short be narratively satisfying if it doesn't show a complete story?
This is the red flag face. If you're making a proof of concept short, you do not need to be making a small section of your feature film. And in fact, you should not be doing. What you should be doing is doing a standalone short film that navigates some of the themes, the tone, the feel of what you're wanting to do in your feature film. Does not replicate it. It's not a mini version of your feature film, and it's not an extract of your feature film, because if it's an extract of your feature film, you've got so many unanswered questions all around it, and it's just like a little snapshot of it. So what we want is a standalone, clear, short story that can actually demonstrate that you understand the 3-act structure, a narrative arc, character development within that whole thing, and therefore you can be entrusted to develop that into a feature-length project. Don't try and replicate your feature film idea in short form. Think of something that has, a lot of synchronicity with it and can stand alone. Hope that's not too much work for whoever asked that question.
How do you feel about exploring ideas in a short film and then expanding them into a feature? Do you feel it can just be retreading the same ideas and not adding anything new?
All stories are retreading ideas. Every story you can ever think of has already been told. The difference is that you haven't told it before. Your turn. I want to know what you think. I want to know what you feel, what your perception of the world is. Finding your original voice is where true originality is. It's not necessarily in the what happens, it's in how it happens, and it's how you see the world.
Great. And now I think this was a question that came in while you were talking about the film 1745. When writing a script, following the example of clothes, should we write details such as color of clothes and style of it, or is that something that needs to be proposed later on by the production design department?
As a general rule of thumb, the thing that goes in the script is what's important to the story. If it's important that a character is wearing red, then tell me. If it's just important that they're bright, like it's bright, then we get a sense that they, it could be anything, right? It might be that red has a specific story. Like in the film Marnie, my favorite Hitchcock film, the color red is massively significant to the character. And so when she sees it, there's a very specific response that needs to be there in the script in order for us to understand what its significance is. If it's necessary, in 1745, for example, you wouldn't necessarily say what color their costumes were, but you would probably say the style and that they're tartan, because the style, the way that they wear them later, has got a significance to the story and the character development. So where it's important to the story, you say it. Where it's obvious or it's not absolutely vital to our understanding of the narrative, don't worry about it.
Okay. And how do you tackle character descriptions within the action of the script?
So you want to be as characterful as possible, but you don't want to overdo it. So it's always a balancing act, right? You essentially want to arm yourself with the thesaurus, and have a look at how characters are described in scripts that you love. Most like kind of mainstream commercial English language films, their screenplays will be available online. Have a look at them, see how people are introduced. There's a terrible habit that people, there's a producer who was wonderfully calling out the descriptions of female characters in screenplays. That was horrifying. Please don't talk about how sexy and beautiful and nubile and young and fit your female characters are, because that doesn't tell me anything about their personality. It tells me what they look like, but I can't get a sense of who they are. So I would want to get something that's going to give a sort of essence of the person. If you're trying to kind of like describe your best mate to somebody, you're not just going to say what they look like, you're going to say something that is imbued with their personality. So it's thinking of it like that.
Right. And then what advice would you give about making sure not to over describe actions or details for actors, but also heads of departments in your scripts?
First off, don't worry about it in your first draft, because you'll always overwrite in your first draft. That's fine. Worry about it when you're rewriting. And then what you're looking for is that you're not repeating yourself, that it's that it needs to be there, and that you're getting really precise about it. And I think that if you can do that, don't worry about kind of emphasis on camera directions, but if you also give it to somebody else to look at, because a script consultant or even somebody who's a fellow writer who is going to be like honest with you, don't ask your mum, because if she don't mind, she'll just tell you how great it is, and that's not helpful. Then you want to actually have somebody go, do you know what, I don't think you needed to really over egg that, and because sometimes we can't see it ourselves. Filmmaking is collaboration. You need to get used to talking to people about your work. Sorry about the big noisy.
No, that's okay. Last question for you, Gabs. Loads of people are asking how many pages would you recommend, how many pages of script for a short film? What is the ideal length?
Depends what the story is. Everything has to be there because it needs to be there. So, in some cases it has to be 20 minutes. In some cases it only needs to be 2. What I would say, if from a strategical point of view, is that festivals like to have films that are around the 10-minute or less mark. I would also say,
yes, definitely.
I would also say that 10 minutes is actually a lot easier to make than 5 minutes or 20 minutes. It feels like it's a manageable amount to do enough character development and story without kind of, you know, sometimes the flaw with longer ones is that they get a little bit baggy around the edges. And sometimes the flaw with shorter ones is they just don't feel substantial enough. So the 10-minute mark is a good kind of thing to aim for. If you have got a really long film, bear in mind from a programming point of view, because festivals are inundated with applications and submissions, what will happen is that they'll have maybe 2 or 3 films of like 10 or 5 minutes, and then your film of like 20-25 minutes. And because film festivals want to help filmmakers get their work out there, then you're putting them in a position where they've got to decide, do we show this one film or do we show these 3? The other thing to bear in mind is that your genre. I cannot tell you how many depressing short films I've seen. They are numerous. Everybody loves to make depressing short films. I'm not quite sure why. Be funny in it. Have fun with it. Do a really strong genre. Do a strong like horror movie. Do a sci-fi for me. Do you know what I mean? Like do something that's really strongly, you know, kind of driving from like a pop culture thing, or you know, things that are a bit more uplifting. I can't tell you the amount of, as I say, short films where you're just so freaking, I mean, they're amazing, they're beautiful, they're powerful, but you're just like, oh my God, I'm so depressed. And it's exhausting. And, you know, particularly in film festivals, they want to show things that are going to make their audience feel good, so that that audience will come back and watch more short films. So if you can just turn your attention to things that are enjoyable, it doesn't make them less worthy. Yeah.
Cool. 2 very quick questions for Theresa now.
Okay.
How many words would you suggest for the synopsis and director's statement?
I think if it's for a mood board and pitch deck, then keep it to 1 page. So, you know, make sure it fits on 1 page, but don't do it in a font so small you can't read it. I don't think you can get more words on the page by reducing your font. And the director's statement, again, that format that Kieran was using, that is kind of standard. Sometimes people tweak it, they have less words and, you know, a bigger picture, or they might have a smaller picture and a few more words. But it is, because it's a visual selling document, remember that the picture is equally as important. The image you choose to accompany that is equally important as the amount of text. But yeah, keep it to 1 page.
Great. And something that we didn't touch upon in as much detail, how should pitch decks talk about sound, or should they purely be visual?
Well, I mean, they can do. I mean, particularly if it's a kind of like a key feature of the short, you know, if it's a key feature of the piece, that the sound isn't intrinsically important. I mean, it is always anyway, but if there is a particular feature that you want to kind of actually expand on, then yes, give it its own page, you know, have your visual, your ideas for kind of like what the sound will sound like, and find an image that can evoke that kind of sound. It's difficult to say, but if it evokes the kind of emotion and the sound, then that will help to set it alive in the reader's mind. You know, they'll be able to kind of like, oh, I can hear that, I can visualize it, you know.
Great. And one last question for either of you to finish off. Would you advise aspiring screenwriters to go to university to study English or film?
Oh,
don't ask me that. I teach at higher ed places. Come on, it's not fair.
It's responsible for your entire future. I'm sorry.
I mean, might want to finish it on.
What I would say is that with film schools and universities are a safe space for you to freely experiment and be supported in your learning of the processes. And for some people, that's the right decision, because it's quite a daunting world. It is not vital, and I know several filmmakers that haven't been to film school and they've remained working from the moment that they've made their first short films. because they're incredibly motivated, self-directed people who are so determined. I mean, and they're like Trojans. You mean, they're incredible. And I think it depends on so many different things. It depends on personality type. It depends on how you learn, and also, it'll be funny, like what resources you've got. I mean, I went to uni like later because I went when I was working full time. So I was working in the day and then going in the evenings, because that way I haven't left with a massive debt. Yeah. But, you know, some people have got the opportunity to go and not, you know, and not have to be kind of chained to that. But it's not essential. Ultimately, when you're applying for stuff, no one's going to ask you what qualifications you've got, and it's not going to fast track you into the industry if you've got a degree, but it will have given you the opportunity to work with people that know their stuff and to learn from them and to use equipment and to practice and experiment. So,
yeah. But it's not going to stop you from having a career if you don't go, because you will learn in making films, you know, in the process, you will learn the same things, you know.
Yeah, filmmaking's very democratic in that. It really is. You know, it's on the basis of what this project is. I mean, like when I heard, you know, at the BFI a few years ago, you had Emma Thompson talking about Screenplay, and like finding out that Oscar-winning, superb, one of the greatest screenwriters like that we have, has 5 unproduced feature-length screenplays. Like, surely you could get them made though, babe. Like, you're sort of connected, right? But no, and it's on the basis of each one. Yeah. So, you know,
it's on the basis of, and also it's not on the basis of your qualifications, as Gab says. It's on kind of the merit of the work, you know, and your unique connection to it, and your passion for it, and your drive to get it done, you know. So
great. Thank you so much both. This was such an excellent session, and I know that I've told you to close the chat boxes, but maybe you want to open them now, because so many people are saying what a great session this was and how much they've so thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your questions as well. I saw some comments in the question box complaining that we didn't get to your question, or that your question got lost. I'm really sorry. There was just so many great questions and we were not able to get through all of them. Before you all go, I just wanted to say that we would really love to know what you thought of today's session in a more formal way. So Winnie will shortly post a link to a quick online survey. If you could help us fill it in and let us know what you thought of today and how we can improve these sessions in the future, that would be super helpful. Our next lab will take place on the 10th of July and will be all about short film funding. Some of the questions were about film funding, so come to the next lab and ask them again. We'll be announcing our guests soon, so keep an eye out on the BFI Film Academy social channels. And we also really hope to be back in the BFI South Bank soon as well. So we'll be announcing all our plans to return to the venue soon. Next up, in 10 minutes, the one-on-one writing sessions with Theresa. So if you're one of the lucky 5 candidates who has a mentoring session with Theresa, we'll see you shortly. If you have not been successful, don't worry. We plan to hold more of these script surgeries later on in the year, both in venue and online. So there will be more chances for you to benefit from Gabs' and Theresa's expertise and wisdom. So don't worry. Again, as I said at the beginning, if you missed any information today, I know some of you wanted some of the information from the slides. You will be able to watch this session again. It will be uploaded on the BFI YouTube channel next week. And that last slide of Theresa's presentation on resources will be emailed to all of you as well. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have lovely weekends, everyone, and see you in July. Bye.
Thank you.